Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, February the 18th, and welcome to our video commentary. Well, today is President's Day in the United States, and obviously we remember the 45 men who have been president, from George Washington to Donald Trump. And on days like this, there's a lot of history when you talk about the presidents, and I tend to look at it in three different ways. You got on one group, you have the top two, who would be Lincoln and Washington. Those are the, let's say the top ones. They happen to be president at critical times in the nation's history. So I would regard those two as the two greatest for different reasons, for clearly the two greatest presidents. Then you have a bunch of others that you read about in school, whether it was Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, James Monroe, McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt, Coolidge, Woodrow Wilson, FDR, even Harry Truman, who I would regard as consequential presidents, interesting presidents, particularly FDR, but they are like a level under Washington and Lincoln. And then you have the ones that you remember, the ones in your lifetime that you actually remember reading about or watching them on television. And for me, that starts with Lyndon Johnson, even though I was born when Eisenhower was president, and I remember being in Cuba when Kennedy was president, but I don't remember those two. I don't remember watching them in the news, but I do remember Lyndon Johnson, and of course, Vietnam was his great tragedy. Then came Richard Nixon, who I always liked. I thought he was a great man, great statesman, but unfortunately, he got in trouble over Watergate, and I think that destroyed his presidency. But I do see Nixon coming back. You see it, his rankings get better with time, because I think people, as time passes, tend to look at the big picture, not just Watergate. Then comes Gerald Ford, who I think is one of the great human beings ever to be president, a wonderful man, very decent man, who did the country a lot of good by restoring the presidency after Watergate. Then Jimmy Carter, who was a total disappointment. Very nice man, very religious man, a good man, but he just wasn't up to the task. Had some bad luck as well with Iran and the economy, but he just wasn't up to the task. Then came President Reagan, who had two very successful terms, probably the most successful president of my lifetime. A wonderful man, great speaker, great communicator, a man who inspired the best in people. He was followed by the first Bush, George H.W. Bush, who passed away earlier this year. Again, great man, the last of the World War II veterans who served as president. Unfortunately, he was not reelected, but I think his one term was super consequential, and I think his history, as time passes, he will be ranked higher and higher as well. Then you have Bill Clinton, who in many ways disappointed, I think, a lot of people. He had some good qualities. He was a great politician. He worked with the Republican Congress and got a lot of things done through compromise and so on. But his personal character problems, I think, did him a lot of harm when it was all said and done. George W. Bush, who I think was a very tough leader, made a lot of tough decisions. And I think over time, his ranking will go up significantly as time passes, because he was a tough, honest man who was dealt some very difficult problems to deal with. Barack Obama came after that. I thought he had some great opportunities as president, but I don't think he quite used them. And he left the presidency without much on his record. And I think as time passes, he will be remembered, of course, as the first black president. He will always be remembered for that. But I'm not sure there's going to be a lot there on the resume to talk about. And that takes us to Trump, and it's too recent, too early to judge Trump, of course. But I'm sure there'll be a lot to say about him as time passes. So that's kind of how I remember the presidents. I think of the ones that I lived under, the ones that I read about, and then, of course, Lincoln and Washington stand out on their own because of their greatness. Well, thank you for watching. Happy President's Day to you. We have all of these on YouTube, on Twitter, on my blog. And if today's your birthday, happy birthday. Bye-bye, everybody.